So next up, may I pass it on to another very special person, Michael Peyser, who is the movie producer and media educator and innovator of digital craft and the power of storytelling. He's also been working with numerous movies, almost 40 movies. He's also works with the likes of Woody Allen as well, and also a very famous film from my childhood called Matilda. So please welcome Michael Peyser.
Okay, here it is.
Okay.
And you can see me, and if you can't, that's fine. I'm going to open up chat on the side in case somebody wants to.
We can see you on the side of the screen.
Yes, you can, and I can see you guys, and I appreciate it. I love movies, okay? I love watching them. I love making them. The storytelling and all the aspects of really collaborative, creative enterprise. I went to movies from when I was a little boy, and when I grew up, you had to go to a movie at a certain time because that's when it showed. And you had to watch a television show when it was on, which was usually just once a week. And the access to media was very limited and defined in a certain way. But I knew I wanted to make movies, and I grew up in the basement of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, watching whatever movie was playing that day. So if I would sneak out of school and go watch Hungarian movies, which were very interesting, by the way, because they only had about 12,000 feet of film. They didn't have film, raw stock, to shoot it photochemically. So they would rehearse and orchestrate 10-minute long scenes for a week, and then they'd film it all in one big Busby Berkeley Hollywood-like move that reframed from a close-up to a wide shot to moving around in horses and peasant dances. And it turned out to be the model of what became MTV. So Hungarian cinema that was made based on not having enough resource created invention that created style that created movies. And I started working. I was tall. Nobody knew how old I was. I had a deep voice. And so I could make phone calls and get things done. And I worked on television commercials, about 100 television commercials before I was 18. And I dropped out of high school. I went to work in London. I got a job. I didn't know London at all. And I got a job as a runner, just carrying film and sound dailies and whatever. But the great thing was I met a different group of people who were filmmakers. And I realized that all over the world, there were these people who lived to almost like go to a special church, which was a communion with story. And luckily, I hung in there and I worked on all these things, and I learned by doing, not by going to school, and by not screwing up too badly and getting the job done. So that's the basis of my story. And don't worry, we'll get around to financing and all the things you need to know. By the time I was 19, I finally got a job on a big feature film. And this was only because I had worked for 4 or 5 years with some assistant directors, production guys who thought I knew my way around the streets. And what we're looking at here is New York. We're looking down on Central Park, which is in the middle of Manhattan. There's the Hudson River on the top and the East River on the other side. And I lived somewhere over here. And I used to spend my time in the park, which was a great sort of public theater of urbanscape. And also there were hundreds of movie theaters, so I could always go to the movies. I worked on a movie called Marathon Man, which was a big feature film, and it starred Dustin Hoffman and Lord Laurence Olivier. And because I had worked with a lot of the crew members when I was younger, I was accepted and used for what I was good at. And I was able to build the confidence, and I drove Lord Olivier because I could talk about movies in theater and he liked me. And I also learned everybody's job from the bottom. And I learned what being a crew was like, meaning collaborating with 4 electricians, 3 grips, 4 people in the camera department, costume people, all these people working together on a mad sort of rush, but we got to get it done. And when we need to film it, we need to be absolutely still and let the actors be the characters and take over the place, even if it's in the middle of the madness of New York City. So it was a great training, and it was an introduction to the most collaborative of art forms, movie making. I eventually became a production manager and then an associate producer, and I worked with some of the greatest New York filmmakers, with Woody Allen and Sidney Lumet, who were made their movies. They didn't make them for studios. They were known as being truly great filmmakers, and people just said, you make your next movie and I'll pay for it. And my job became making sure that I could put a price point on how much it was going to cost, not how much, but how little it could. And vouching for that, because the people putting up the money for those movies didn't actually have approval of the creative. It belonged to the filmmakers themselves. So it was a rare opportunity to work in a unpressured but self-responsible environment. Major companies would then come to me thereafter to manage, because I managed these famous filmmakers. If you were coming from France or coming from Italy or coming from Asia, they would say, Mike, you have to help us. We're going to shoot these scenes here in Manhattan and you're the guy. And I would work to adapt the filmmaking practice of the people coming in, to adapt to the very strong union stricture, limited hours, required breaks for lunch and dinner, overtime if you worked more than this, penalties for that, cost management functions. And that's not how these international filmmakers would work coming in. And I became a sort of middleman between the cultures. And that was a great experience. And we'll relate back later to some comments about filming in Thailand. I made about 12 movies in that 8 or 9 years, some really great and famous comedies. And I realized that I had to leave my Woody Allen family, and I started to produce, and I produced a very famous movie called Desperately Seeking Susan, which was the debut of Madonna. I knew Madonna when she had a last name. And she was just a singer on her way up, working the clubs and trying to get her demos played. But she was perfect for this particular role that we were doing in a movie. It was a movie that was produced by 2 women and me. It was directed by a woman. It starred 2 women, and it launched the career of probably more actors coming out of New York and who are now still huge stars. And it created a culture which became the music video culture of the early 80s into the 90s. And I made a couple more movies, produced them in New York, and said, I want to go off and produce movies that I generate, that I create, that I initiate. And so when I was about 30, I left for LA and I got a job working on a movie called Ruthless People. And it starred Bette Midler and Danny DeVito, and it was a very funny idea written by a guy who worked in a stereo store. For all of you who are, how do I get my script to work? It worked on every beat of every page of the script. It was funny, it was wicked, it was cruel, it was nasty, it was insidious, it was important. It felt like something. And that's how he got this movie made. And it got made by a triumvirate, a three-headed directing crew who had only made comedies, but some of the most famous ones, a movie called Airplane. And I became the fourth musketeer at the camera to their trio, and we had great fun, and it made very successful movie just at the time that the Walt Disney Studios was starting to come out of its long 15-year shadow after Walt passed away. And I became one of the one or two producers who made those movies at the beginning of the new Walt Disney Studio. And eventually, after a couple of years, they asked me if I wanted to found my own division of the studio where we'd make 12 movies every year and develop 50 and spend $40 million in development, to make those movies. And even though I liked so much the process of being on the set, I ended up saying, yes, let me try that. And I became the founding senior vice president of a thing called Hollywood Pictures. And it was a great experience. We put together a really interesting team of people who are all major executives now as the junior executives. But after about 2 years, I realized I did not like sitting in a boardroom, a conference room, talking about not making a movie. I was much better suited to working with a group of people who were going to make something and make it great. So having come to California, I said, look, what I wanted from coming, which was, while I was a buyer of content at the studio, I got to meet all the agents, all the lawyers, all the talent hawkers, and a lot of writers and a lot of young directors, and created opportunity for them so that after about 2 years, I said, look, let me go make movies with these people. And I did, and I have then made, so I made about 40 movies at the studio as an executive, and then I've made about another 30 since then. And I'm lucky. I make stories that I like. I have to fight just as hard as everybody else, sometimes harder, because I don't make things that are envisioned as commercial projects, but I certainly don't mind making money. Okay, now, this is the world now. We're looking at our current, this is the Western media world. It's a marvelous graphic by a guy named Eric Shapiro, who is eShep, and you should go online and see what he does. He captures industries, this industry, and creates graphs or pictorial representation of size. And for instance, let's say up here with Disney, Disney is in red, so they're a content platform, but they're also a studio, so they're connected here. Apple is over here, and they're even bigger because they make phones, they sell phones, they have content, they do music, they do headphones, they do television now. They are a $2.8 trillion company. The only ones that are as big are Microsoft, Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, which is FaceTime, Amazon, which is shopping and media, and big companies like Netflix and Time Warner and AT&T, Sony, they look relatively small, and they are, and this is a portrait of our media culture, because movies have been subsumed, taken in and embraced and become a part of something. And there's so many different companies involved in making and distributing in the current universe of media. This chart is market capitalization, and quite frankly, the next chart is where came from earlier in the year, the first of the year, and so the companies had actually grown to this size. I don't want to show you the one of today because they've all crashed down to about a third less than the size that they are now, and that's been a result of the world changing. There is a new paradigm of time and place in which the audience now has more control in choice in what it watches. Why is that? It's because we're in transition from a theatrical, from cable, into a world where streaming platforms let you see anything that existed before ever. All media is available to everybody who's listening to me right now. They can access it somehow. They may have to pay a little bit to a platform. They may have to go searching for it. But remember Quentin Tarantino from the earlier talk being in a video store? You're all in the video store. You all have a much bigger video store than Quentin Tarantino. You just have to hone your curiosity about what it is that you want to do. But COVID, which was a plague of our time, and it still is, and people are treating it like it isn't, and it's still a real presence, through the economies of the world, mostly because the leadership of the world did not get organized to say, what do we have to do to come out of this? They resisted coming up with a good plan the way filmmakers would to say, oh, you mean products won't be available? Maybe we better figure out how to do, use blockchain to figure out what do we need to have to come out of it. But media is no longer only available at certain times and places. It's always available, and there's plenty of it. Our essential relationship with media has changed, and the audience is in complete control of what and when they watch. Big change. And it's changed who's serving it up to us and how we are both buying into it and being sold down the river by the people who are understanding our taste and who are trying to sell us what people want to sell, not necessarily finding out what makes us happy, but we'll get back to that. There are big movies still. Let's say that COVID really does start to go away as it is. And we have theatrical distribution, which has movies that make $1 billion, $2, $3, $4 billion in their IP cycle. And those are usually, you have, as a producer, you have to make a choice regarding what category your product lives in and how you're going to scale it. You would say, oh, those are movies that cost $100, $200 million to make. Maybe, but I can tell you that Parasite didn't cost that much. Coda didn't hardly cost anything, but those are on the other side of the equation where you're telling not a superhero myth or a fantasy world, but character-driven stories of human drama. When you say, what can I do to make my stories better? You can read, you can learn how the conflicts of people, however they're organized or whatever it is that they are passionate about, gets conflicted. There is conflict, as Tom said, but there is also ingenuity, there is alliance, there is backstabbing, there are all sorts of behaviors, there's honesty and dishonesty. We seem to live in an era of dishonesty, and it would be fascinating for people to figure out how to tell that story and purge it out of us in a way that is a little bit like what Don't Look Up was, which was a big Netflix movie. These first group of pictures tend to be what we know as popular and enjoyed in the theater as a communal blockbuster viewing experience. They deal with dynamics, quick cutting, speed. They're not dissimilar to being in a high-level video game. Guess what? You know what's even bigger than blockbuster movies? High-level video games. They have a bigger effect on cultural effect on how people proceed through their experience. And that's turning into a very dangerous thing, particularly in America, where people who can start to believe that they are living in a video game and there are too many guns to shoot with. The second group is, I said, the art house viewing, and it becomes, you know, both of these pictures won the Oscar, and they were wonderful movies, and they couldn't be more different. They're both about families. Parasite is about a horrible family that gets taken over by an even more horrible family, and they reveal a lot through the metaphor of family and have not. And it's extremely powerful and enjoyable to watch because it's played as dark farce. In Coda, it's a story about a young girl who is just like you and me, but her mother, her father, and her brother are non-speaking. They're deaf. And they have to communicate, and she is the communicator for the family, but she's grown up. She has a boyfriend now, and she has the opportunity to go out into the world, and it's about that coming to terms. So you can tell, and it was told by somebody who had that experience and made it powerful. Producer has a decision. Do I want to make a movie that will bring paying audiences to the theater, or make one that will likely sell subscriptions to a vast platform? Access to profits, or excess profits, which would be a hit in the theater model, or a enhanced fee up front because platforms and subscribers and Netflix and all of the big streaming platforms, those big circles in the first Shapiro globe world that I showed you, they're going to pay you one amount and they're not going to pay you any more except for a pre-agreed premium to own what you did forever. The guy who made Squid Game didn't make a lot of money off of Squid Game. He didn't think it was going to be particularly successful. He was just happy to be able to make it. And when it caught on first in Korea and then around Asia and then across the whole world, he's now being paid much more to do the sequel, but he didn't actually make a vast fortune. He got a profile raised, but and he wrote it and made it in the quality and with the shaping and nuance that it had about a culture that felt it was broke and needed to really confront putting its life on the line. And that turned out to be what the culture was all about. So you want to talk about how to creatively develop and find intellectual property. Let's start at the beginning of a production. What elements do you need to get a movie or a limited series made? If you're a producer and you have to do it, you need inspirational stories that sell, that literally somebody reads the script, it's high quality writing, an entertaining, readable script, meaning you pick it up and an hour and 15 minutes later, you put it down and you went, that's a great ride. It took me all the way there. It didn't bump me. It took me places. I see how it progressed, but I wasn't manipulated by it. I was delivered in a sort of communion. As a producer, you have to have that to show, and you have to have a presentation, an engaging presentation pitch for the project. And that might also include pre-visualized elements in the pitch presentation that will demonstrate what it is, both filmically, cinematically, dramatically, story-wise, that will drive people. And people are using new tools and new language to do that. But before we get to using those tools, you have to say audience and market analysis of the project and its appeal are broken down here. We have a proportion of movie genres, which I'm sure is changeable from place to place, but by and large, drama, comedy, thriller, action, romance, and adventure, and crime, and horror are about 3/4 of everything that succeeds and that audiences go to. Everything else, including documentaries, animation, probably post-Pixar is a much bigger thing and will be a great opportunity. But and then on the other side, you have the new tools of social media, which provide an insight into a group of people, an audience, and a direct way of reaching out to them based on their predilection, their response. Do they like blondes or brunettes? Do they like football or tennis? What do they like? And everybody, all of you are identifiable, and you are being sold by the self-same companies that are trying to get your subscription to other advertisers, and we'll get to that too. So who is your audience is the big question, and a clear awareness of that, because you don't want to be making a movie that you think is for a big audience when really there's a big enough audience that the project will attract, because you know the quality of that project will engage with them. The greatest movies of all time, before you tend to start going back, starting 10, 15 years ago, were based on a small group of filmmakers or producers trusting their gut about the audience. And the ones that succeeded had in mind, had in their own hearts, a sense of that audience, and they made the movies for that. So now, with social media, producers have a way to directly access their audience before and during the creation of their projects. Sources of intellectual property can come from books and published stories. Here are some English version of Thai references. But a book means it can be actually a book which you have to purchase and get the rights to and define how much you're going to pay for the underlying book, or it can be something a little bit more like a story that is based on real life events, purchased life rights. It can be historical or contemporary, which provides the audience layers and moments of human experience and challenge. So there's nothing wrong with going with Tom Cruise into a F-16 and flying it upside down. that is a challenging human experience, at least to me. But the question is, are the stakes of what is at risk for that character, does it become involving? Does the story of the trapped boys, I understand this is controversial in Thailand because the big Western movie, the Ron Howard movie, wasn't even made in Thailand because of superior rebates and benefits that were available in Australia. So we'll get around to how Thailand gets its rightful position for the marvelous and beautiful and diverse place that it is. Beyond real stories, you can use folklore, and whether it's epic, which would be Star Wars in a way, or the story of, I think the biggest movies in South Asia have been the movies that were made out of Hyderabad, recently using good visual effects and telling Vedic myths. So I know Thailand has a huge historical or myth structure. I think Tom referenced that. And maybe you don't do it thousands of years ago. Maybe you do it last Thursday and you bring that story culturally to the streets of Bangkok. And maybe that's the way of embracing how the generations pass on and saying something about the generation that you're in, because that is what brings people to watch it. Producers are obliged to take some risk and spend much time in the early stages of a project and their money shaping the script and selling their plan to make the project to potential funders. So you would have a lot of time in creative development. Send me a draft, I'll give you notes, we'll go back, what makes it? Oh, I realize after reading what you've done, what if we made the dog into a girl or the girl into a dog? And, it's like that would be better. And eventually you come out with something you've developed with the writer, because it's rare that you're going to read a script that's perfect, but producers love finding something that grips them and makes them want to find out. And then you go and say, where's the best place to do this? You send out scouts, you build a reference, and then you have to go and say, okay, I need to go find, I wish there was a money bag, a rich person, a bank, or even an entertainment company that might pay for me to be going out and putting these projects together. And that cost is usually the burden of the producer individually, but there's still many places to find venture partners depending on the project. In my world, in the studio world, imagine that there are 6 big studios. There are probably 4 big, 5 big streamers that now sit on top of them, but they have funded production companies where they're paying producers and associate producers and readers and development people to pour through all the stuff that's coming in to funnel it up to what should we make. And each one of these, Walt Disney has Pixar, it Touchstone, it has Marvel, it has Miramax. It has these little sort of turrets of the castle that are fighting their own battle, and everybody meets in the yard and says, where should we go fight the big battles? On top of this whole group of entities that group up to be the approval, it's moving up. Yes, they want to make it. What does it cost? There are agents, talent agents who represent actors, directors, musicians, less so producers. There are managers who take care of those self-same talent and directors. There are lawyers who represent them in the business affairs world. There used to be a lot, and now there's still some sales agents who will know somebody in 64 different countries that they can sell rights to the movie territorially. And these are the established producers as well. Somebody like me, somebody even younger and more eager, but with a couple of great credits, who you might reach out to and say, I know you did this, but you're gonna like mine. Or what about this? Or how do I do that? How do you get to those gatekeepers? You have to, it's like when I was a kid working on commercials, it either happens or it doesn't. You have to be paying attention. The way I succeeded on that big movie Marathon Man was that very famous former head of the studio, producer Robert Evans, had never really produced a movie before, and he was producing that one, and he thought, well, I'll prove I'm a producer, I'll fire somebody every week. Now, I grew up in New York where there's a subway, and I knew enough that I have eyes in the back of my head, and I know if somebody's going to push me into the track, so I would stand behind the post. And he fired all the people. I was 19. He fired everybody on top of me so that by the third week of shooting, somebody had to open up in the morning. Somebody had to park the trucks. Somebody had to organize the madness. So it's really a little bit of luck, but it's really listening, paying attention, and being useful. The financial viability and profitability issues of your projects. As a venture producer, you need to know what kind of budget you need to make the project in full. And full means delivered to the distribution entity with all of its different versions and everything that is going to be your budget, which would be possible to research through comparable projects from recent years, their budgets. And if the whole basis of the value equation that you look at of how much it's going to cost and how much you might make as a sample hasn't been essentially changed by the streamers, which it has to some extent, they may pay you a premium on the fee that you would get for producing it, but they won't give you a percentage of the profits anymore. So I've made some movies that cost $10 million to make. They made $40 million, and I made $500,000 of profit after everybody at the studio stole back everything they could. But with the streamer, I'm going to be able to say my fee is 10x. And yes, they say you've gotten 10x before. We'll pay you 13x. More than you normally get, but we're going to own everything. And that is what the new paradigm for both producers or anybody on a movie who used to taste or benefit by the profits, that is going away. And it's a big battle in Hollywood, I'll tell you that. The Producers Guild this past weekend had its annual gathering, and they're ready to go to war with the streamers. Streaming platform will do a full buyout of rights versus a theatrical release with parcel territorial rights and a profit upside, because they are not selling tickets to your production. They are selling, hopefully, long-term subscriptions to their major streaming viewing platform. The relationship between buying a ticket to go to a movie and the movie is different, because the movie doesn't matter. What the streamer is buying is you being hooked up to the service. Theatrical versus territorial international rights and profit participations based on a percentage of revenue. It means the studios would screw you anyway with a definition which wasn't, yes, we'll give you a percentage of the profits, but we have to take back this, we need to take that, we need a fee for this, we need a fee for that. Or, hey, you made all your money back, I get the next 10 cents. It's hard to get that. You have to make them tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to get that better definition. With a streamer, I might make that extra 20, 30% on a fee, and it's not a bad living. I got to get moving here and I'm going to do it. Attaching the other way, you then embellish the script, and your plan is you attach talent, actors in front of the camera, and great directors, musicians, cinematographers, crews, costume designers, all those people behind, and you say, I have all these wonderful people put together. They're going to work together like a integrated in order to deliver the maximum return on investment and to make the absolute best movie or a series. You need what I call mortgageable talent, meaning people that people will pay for in advance, even though they haven't seen the finished product. They'll take the risk to pay for those more valuable people because there's a commercially and a measurable bigger market quotient with them. So that's where the agents and the managers come in. Changing the subject a little bit, but actually staying on the fact of the new workflow of creative content. Our newly digital and linkable industries is changing in so many ways, other ways, especially in new possibilities of craft and creative content workflow. And what does that really mean? Producers must essentially make the movie 5 times. They're going to have to envision it entirely and think about how they're going to bring all the pieces that they have to play with, all the roles of cast, crew, all the way through till it's finished and in the theater at the process and the period of story development. They're going to have to do it when you go out in pre-production to plan the shoot so that you do and get everything you need and you make that special thing come about to be captured in the cameras and on sound. And during the production period, you have to deal and rock and roll with all of the difficulty and mistakes and changes that the good plans that you did twice before. But by then, let's say you're in production, normally it's the director and the cinematographer and the ADs and everybody marshaling an army of creative technicians. But you've also got editors and sound people and people who are working on what will become putting all those collected pieces together. It used to be, it was a sequence. You start with very few people, you add more, you shoot it, you get rid of all the people, you edit it, and then you bring in the orchestra and you record it and you do it. Now, everything is alive. All those roles need to be communicating. So all these stages are active all the time and intertwined, making the workflow for me as a kid who's a runner who's just trying to make sure getting it done, or me as the producer, are coherently informed so I make the right choice at my level and in my place. And that is what the new digital connected culture is doing to the making of movies. Full budgeting, pre-scheduling, and pre-visualizing the project. Now, how do you do that? Now, this is a picture of Chris Edwards, who is the CEO of the Third Floor, which is one of the 2 or 3 great visualization companies. They use real-time engines from gaming and from military software and hardware, and a greater understanding of how human senses and brains function in taking things in. And they started this actually in the George Lucas reboot of Star Wars about 20 years ago. And they started using computers even then to make the entire sort of storyboard, but do it in a more active fashion. Well, I don't know how many of you do game, but I can tell you that Unreal allows you to do just about anything. And if I were a kid anywhere in the world, I would learn and download, because they make it available to you. And you can create your own worlds, your own characters, which means pretty soon a large group of creative people are going to be able to work, and Tom and Eric are going to talk about this tomorrow, use these tools in virtual production. But imagine you just made a 3-minute sequence that made Disney spend $140 million on your movie because you wowed them, and they say, if that's in the movie and if you can do that, you took my breath away. It's like you put the best possible ice cream sundae out there and everybody loved it. Managing this new workflow is the new craft and knowledge that we must all learn to be successful in that new media landscape, because remember, that includes everybody who is dealing in the, and it was alluded to in the initial comments by the minister about social media and how that is part of our connectivity. So when you put all this together and you have a good script and you have all these things, you have to go deal with financing and the risk of return on investment. I'll tell you a secret that's not a secret. Most movies lose money. People are in this business because some movies make a lot of money and everybody likes to be attached to something that is big, connective, sticky, culturally important. So let's talk about financing in this world of video on demand, meaning I want to see this, that, or the other thing world. It used to be, until about pre-COVID really, that there was a world of territorial financing and sales, which are still done, but much less so. That would be in Cannes and Berlin and American Film Market and Toronto, and in Asia, various markets. Those were transactional sales for Thailand, Korea, all 64 markets where somebody will pay you for releasing your movie. You may only get 20 of them, but that may be enough of commitments from those. It used to be theater companies or distributors in those countries who would balance it out. Now, remember, it's the streamer who wants everything everywhere. In general, in the new paradigm, you are going to end up selling to a video on demand company. I listened to an hour by the biggest lawyer in Hollywood who did all the deals, and he basically turned to the audience and said, it's going to be a video on demand business structure and enterprise for producers. It won't be that way in Thailand yet, but you have to look at making for markets that will at least pay you into profit, and then look to the rest of the world, other markets, to do it. Find the anointed ones, as this same lawyer called them. Those are the people who can get you into the big, big pipes for putting out a lot of material. And those are the lawyers, the agents, the funded production companies. Don't worry about giving up half your fee or more than that to get it made. You'll get it made. And once you get it made, you have credibility on a level where you can then say, I found a great filmmaker, I believe in him, I have to do this, will you give me the money? You have to start proving yourself, and then you will get people to pay for you. How do you do that? You look at credits to see who those people are. You go online to do it. So you use the Internet Media Data Bank, IMDb, to see who's doing what and how they're connected. There are many different places you can do it. And you might even find a pre-sale company left around. Where am I? Green light, hold on. Okay. Those people who are making the big decision, they're actually using AI. They're using data and analysis to value the project. They're assessing the risk of return on investment. The analysis of audience and market data are utilized to put a value on the project. That's how Netflix decides yes or no, even though they may give also a strong amount of choice to somebody's passion, saying, I believe in this filmmaker, I believe in this story, but you have to be able to defend it in the room, and somebody will say, yeah, you're just a newbie here, but you get a chance. And that's how some of these projects turn into huge things. At a minimum, the project's budget needs to satisfy the financial risk. I know I said most movies lose money. It's getting harder to make the ones that, are at too risky and allow for the recoupment of the funder's equity investment plus distribution costs and overhead for that distribution cost. So you have to make 2 times back what the movie costs before somebody's going to feel like they're getting benefit for making it. The other big thing, and we're going to get to it now, is before we go to where to film and bring it home, you can make a genius movie for $50,000. I taught for 12 years at the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts. I was one of the 3 top people who taught producing, which means creative collaboration. I taught people who needed to know what everybody is doing. And the way we taught it is we made everybody be a producer who wanted to be a director. We made everybody who wanted to be a cinematographer have to be a director. We made everybody change roles and collaborate with each other and make the writer of the project not the filmmaker, but all 3 of people rotating those roles through the graduate program. They had to embrace it as their baby. That understanding turns out to be why it's so valuable to go to that particular school, because it's based on making and learning on making. Film schools are expensive, and often I would meet really interesting applicants and say, you're ready to make a movie, go take the money half the money you would have spent to go to film school and just get people together to make it. Find the right talent and do it. There is a world for that. That's where festivals, the Sundance circuit, the places where you will be recognized. It doesn't have to be a feature-length movie, but cameras don't cost that much. And the iPhone that is right here is better than the cameras that Gordon Willis shot The Godfather with. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's all about how you tell a story. So where to film, where to shoot and why, and how does that impact people coming to Thailand? How do the studios and streamers and independent producers decide where to film? There are subsidies and rebates, and they're a huge impact, and that's governments all over the world are offering rebates or tax credits to productions which film in and utilize the crews and facilities of their country, province, or city. In some territories like Europe, co-productions between multiple countries can save producers as much as 25% of their budgeted cost. For example, in the US state of Georgia, a generous rebate has shifted so many productions from Hollywood to Georgia. They've created a major industry center, and hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested into the infrastructure, into building new studios and facilities. Companies like Entertainment Partners, which track and advise studios and producers on obtaining the maximum benefit of rebates by managing payrolls and cost reporting. They validate where you can actually make a rebate work, and they can put it into the contracts that become the terms of the business arrangements. Thailand does offer a benefit, but it is limited. There are some problems that have been discussed, and I think the next panel will get into that, and we'll talk with Mr. Simon about what needs to happen. And there are related benefits to any country in terms of if you make movies there and you show off the country, tourism and hospitality industries can bring many times the money that are put into rebates. New York City puts in a huge amount into rebates, huge amounts, millions, tens, hundreds of millions every year. They get it back by the billions by promoting New York because that's the setting of those movies. And so it's being able to understand how that works. Facilities, the real reasons of, what do you need when you're choosing where to do things? Facilities and quality crew base is important. You need as many local crew who sleep in their own beds, who are skilled as the person that you would have brought from another country. The difficulty is shared language and industry practice, but that will be built and will work. Culture and tourism, you need to have things that people want to see and want to be the settings of the things, but you will also offer that to those crews coming there because it's a great place to visit, be, and work. You need really stringent and valuable health and safety protocols and practicums and behavior. You need great travel. You've got one of the most beautiful airports in the world in Bangkok. You need lodging, and in the end, bottom line, no matter what you do, usually the cheapest alternative is what the studio is going to go with and what the producer is going to go with. The bottom line usually does win. Briefly about distribution, because my time is just about up. Domestic and international markets for Thai media. I think there's an opportunity to take over the vast world that is around you in terms of the marketplace and the number of people and the number of Asian audiences that are within a prescribed cycle around Thailand. Thailand also has culturally a fairly open book in terms of storytelling so that it could also transfer to the States, to Europe, to the Western culture. And I think it's a great place to potentially be. It has a strong local market for nurturing their filmmakers and storytellers. This local market needs to support their own theater-going experience. You can't let theaters go away. You have to make them available. You need to create the opportunity for, instead of people watching TikToks all the time, have them watch movies and learn storytelling and be part of it.
ได้
To build, yeah, you need me out? Is somebody talking to me? Nope, great. To build their worldwide audience, the Thai industry, I think, needs to build multilingual skills, to learn online about world media and how to tell impactful stories and recognize how to tell them for a global marketplace. See other stories and learn how your stories are not mundane or how to make it what you have interesting to everybody else. Make those lower cost, highly watchable series, because series are becoming everything and become known for delivering quality, what I would call want to watch media. Make it distinctive, make it fast, hot, slow, considered, beautiful. Make it distinctive and mix those qualities. There's an opportunity to create a style that has yet to really come out and nurture a group or a generation or generations of filmmakers. Thai filmmakers need to travel, and they need to be supported by people in country and the government to get them to international markets and festivals to make their presence known. in the distribution panel tomorrow at the last panel, I'm going to be talking about other ways that exist beyond just the big streamers, which are CTV, which means built into every TV set that exists is effectively a programming capability. And all of those hardware companies are providing that, and all of these genre and fast TV, which is what Cinedigm is a really interesting instance of. You'll hear Yolanda talk about that tomorrow. But it's all about figuring out, well, oh, I made this much money in this area from Paramount, but I can also have a subscription service, and then I can also show it for free with advertising. That notion of providing different price points or entry points so that nobody is shut out from the opportunity of watching is key. And these are emerging platforms that I think will be a launching pad for Thailand. There's also real opportunities in advertising funded free VOD, which means companies and stories. We'll get into that. I think they'll talk about that tomorrow. I think the last session tomorrow will address these, so I don't need to totally go into that. What is the future from my point of view? It is that we've got to build it now. We've got to get together about how to build it now, to not wait for it to happen somewhere else, but get ahead of the game. And how do you do that? You dedicate resources, and you have to do that in order to prosper and stay relevant. And so it's a national agenda, it's a Bangkok agenda, it's a Southeast Asian agenda. There are opportunities because China is shutting itself off in some ways. Skills training, all of that can happen by watching and being tied in by skill sets like YouTube and things like that to give you instruction, but then go make movies all the time. But when you get a skill and you know how to be a computer jockey and deal with different apps and different applications and different techniques, you'll serve a digital apprenticeship. What you need is a certification, a badge that says, I know how to do this, and you could hire me. Guess what? This thing called blockchain. Blockchain is a certification. It will be giving out certificates. That will become a new market of education at a low price point. Storytelling for a global audience, we talked about, is look at the world, look at what your world can tell to that world. Look what you can tell to your world about the outside world. How can you touch people? By the way it's always been told. Access to and fluency in story and media, I talked about that earlier. Just be a sponge, take it in, talk to people, follow up on your movie, the movies you like, deconstruct them, understand how they work and why they don't work, love characters and try to reinvent them. Enabling and underwriting the cultural economy of next generations. Now that's a bigger story and has to do with not letting digital connection be a way of owning the public, but a way of the public owning their future and building an economy forward. And it is the difference between regressive or economies of false need that have led to the environmental abyss that we live in. And everybody's got to do a lot of changing and adjusting, but we could build industries where we will prosper in doing such. And that requires national and international leadership. And that is a basis, not just in government, but in bringing your story on a local basis and being able to explain yourself and not argue, but build a story together with the rest of the community. So this is all what we need to focus on and dedicate the resources to. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this chat and share with you. I have plenty more other lives that I've lived, but I'm going to throw some questions at Nick, who is the expert in the area, and hopefully we'll have a fun chat next. So I'm available, I think, now or after the next session, depending on where we are in time. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Peyser. I've been informed that we have a lot of questions coming in our webinar now. However, we would probably not be able to answer all of them right now at this point. However, our staff members will answer all of those questions and send them later on to our audience members. I liked how you mentioned the fact that you worked on practically all aspects of movie making. You said you worked on 100 TV commercials before the age of 18, and you also worked on so many aspects of financing. You also said that it is extremely important about those gatekeepers, so keep an eye out and be there when people start getting fired, right?
Right. And,
so this is
enjoy the struggle, because, you know, I remember a time where I was left by an electrician under the Brooklyn Bridge guarding a light, and he went off to drink his lunch at midnight. And there was a huge light that Conrad Hall, the wonderful cinematographer, was at, and the rats came out of the river to attack me. And I'm guarding this light.
Yes.
And I just want you to know those experiences are hugely beneficial.
Okay, so a lot of interesting aspects there.
To not get too nervous, throw stones, and pray.
So do as much as possible.
I will look at all the questions, and I'll be glad to stay after to answer as best I can.
Yes,
okay?
We very much appreciate that. And then, as Mr. Peyser said, do as much as possible and get as much as exposure as you can.